So yesterday I made a video talking about how Justin Trudeau is pretty much wanting to go to war with Russia, but not Canada versus Russia. He wants Ukraine to go even more into war with Russia by launching those long-range missiles, Shadow Storm, that can kind of be modified with nuclear warheads on them, and that is causing a lot of problems. In response to that, Russia has said, if you do that, we will kill you. And NATO has responded saying, we don't really believe you. But today, there's kind of a historic moment between Russia and Ukraine with a pretty large prisoner swap. So we're going to be taking a look at that along with a few other things. But also on the flip side of that, NATO is saying, we agree that Ukraine should be able to use those missiles. Yep, let's go. Come on, pick it up. Let's get that done. And Russia's going, no, we're going to destroy every single one of you. So that's the state of the world right now. If you haven't been worried, now's the time to probably worry. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video, everybody. Before we get into it, I do want to encourage everyone to smash that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. It does really help grow the channel. We're going to be doing things almost in reverse order today. Normally I start off with a little bit of global news, just American stuff that goes on. Then I get into the Canadian stuff because this is a Canadian channel, but I'm going to start off with a little bit of Canadian stuff, and then we're going to get into the Russia and NATO conflict because it's not looking very good. So of course, we're going to start off with the polls like we always do here in Canada. Pierre Poilievre sitting at 212 projected seats, bottom line 181, top end 234. Justin Trudeau at 77 projected seats. Bloc Québécois at 36, and the NDP, hold on here, let me put on my glasses. Sorry, I got to zoom in. All things come in different size packages. 16 projected seats. It's almost like he's not a serious politician at all. And then 99% likely across the board for the Conservatives of winning the most seats and odds of a majority government. So things are looking good there. But where they're not looking good are Tim Hortons. Ontario woman devastated after ordering breakfast at I keep saying Tim Hortons. Oh, yeah. Tim Hortons. I paid $7 for that. Let's take a look. So this individual went to get breakfast, and this is the breakfast sandwich or breakfast wrap, $7. And as you can see, it is fairly small. Even a McDonald's hamburger doesn't cost as much, and I feel like you get more bang for your buck. And that's what they throw in there. A weird looking egg, some fake sausage, some sauce, some cheese, and they wrap it in a wrap, and that's it. And to be honest, I feel like we should just stop eating fast food across the board. I did have a post on X not too long ago that before my wife gave birth to our son on Canada Day, when she was still pregnant, she was craving fries. And if you've ever dealt with a pregnant woman, you don't say no to her cravings. And so I, of course, went to McDonald's, got a medium fry, and it was like $4.40 or 60 cents or something along the lines. And it wasn't a lot. Like, the medium fries are not very large, or else they would be called a large fry. And it just feels like this shrinkflation thing that's happening. It's insane. It doesn't make any sense. You are paying astronomical amount of dollars for little bites of food under the guise of, well, it's convenient. And I get it. Fast food is extremely convenient, but come on. I mean, I can't cost that much to make it. Stop crazy, like increasing your profit margins like that. Oh my God, maybe Jagmeet does have a point. Greedy CEOs. I support Jagmeet. Is what he wants me to say. Remember how he used me in that video? Anyways, moving on. I don't support Jagmeet. That's a joke. It's not really funny. We have Justin Trudeau, who is giving a loan to a Canadian tech company to basically go up against Elon Musk's Starlink. The Canadian government announced a loan of $2.14 million. Oh, no, sorry. Let's zoom in. $2.14 billion. Canada loves to just hand out money to help a Canadian company. Oh, no. Separatist provincial Quebec company to build a broadband satellite network that will connect more remote communities to the internet. Honestly, why are French people so highly rewarded in this country? It doesn't even make any sense. And then let's take a look at what this company is here, right? So they're called Telesat. Let's just look at what they actually do, and then we're going to look at some interesting financials about this company.
Violet, phone home. That's what scientists are trying to tell New Brunswick's first satellite. After months of unsuccessful attempts, they have just days left.
We're making every effort we can to communicate with Violet before it potentially or will re-enter the Earth's atmosphere.
It was launched with 2 other satellites as part of a Canadian Space Agency program. Levine says they don't know which satellite was which, and 2 have already vaporized. That means they've got a 1 in 3 chance they're contacting the right one. Theories on why Violet hasn't responded range from a solar storm to transmission problems, but they're not giving up.
Recently, one of the things that we've done is we've started yelling louder at Violet.
Bumping their transmissions up by 110 watts.
And that's sort of like trying to get your friend's attention across the street, but you're not talking loud enough, so you start yelling louder at them.
He says they have about 10 to 15 minutes to communicate a day, or roughly 120 more minutes to contact Violet before it vaporizes.
All right, so if you're thinking what I'm thinking, and that would be, this seems very odd and kind of old, outdated technology. And also, why are we giving a province that much money, even if it is a loan, for something that already exists, like Starlink? And we're going to get to that in a moment. But this is a super weird company, right? Let's take a look at their website here. Telesat Lightspeed LEO Network. And they say that they're, global leaders in the industry. And I have never once heard of this company, ever. I've been born and raised, lived in Canada my entire life. Never once. I've done camping. I've lived in a van. I've talked to people that work in the corporate world. I have never once heard of Telesat. And that would be because it's not really for all of Canada. It's mostly for certain parts of Quebec. But people are using, again, Starlink, which is not costing Canadians $2.14 billion. So, of course, you would think that this company must be just thriving in finances. Like, they must be doing really well, like a big startup company or a massive corporation that's just exceeding all of their financial data points. And so let's take a look at just the stock, right? Telesat Corp, in the past one day, on closing day, because of the grant, they went up 15%. Interesting. In the past 5 days, 16%. Okay. Past month, 31%. That's a pretty good company. Past 6 months, a little bit less than the past 1 month, but at almost 25%. Year to date, 18%. Things are looking good. Oh my God, is this a good company? Should I invest? The 1 year down 30%. 5 years down 67%. And the market cap is $601 million US dollars. So it kind of begs a question. Why is Canada giving a company that has gone down 67% in the past 5 years of its entire valuation, $2.14 billion, to now be a competitor to Starlink? The answer is likely insider trading. They guys a massive loan to then give dividends to maybe certain shareholders or certain business expense write-offs to certain people that are on a board, and it's just very weird all around. And I am smelling a committee hearing meeting at some point in the near future around Telecorp. That doesn't make any sense at all. And I'm not the only person who thinks that. You have Conservative MP Michael Barrett, who says, hey, Elon Musk, how much would it cost to provide Starlink to every Canadian household that doesn't have high speed? If this $2.14 billion plan is expanding access, competition, and service, where is the interest from private investors and banks? And as you can see, Trudeau wants to have another monopoly and control what we can access on the internet and make us pay deeply for it. And that's kind of the reality here in Canada. We're seemingly turning into North Korea. In a sense, right? Now, it's obviously not as bad because we know Justin Trudeau has a bum hole. It's situated on his face, right under his nose. But nonetheless, you have a country who wants to limit how much other news we get from other countries, who wants to have all of our stuff made here in Canada for Canadians, and almost put up this like metaphorical border, this bubble around our country and increase our prices, but without increasing our wages, and to the point where we all starve to death and live in poverty. And that is where we are headed. But I'd love to know what you guys think down below in the comments. Also, what the hell is that company? Have you ever heard of Telecorp? It just seems ridiculous to spend $2.14 billion on a company that most people have not heard of, but that it's also lost almost 70% of its value in 5 years. What could go wrong? Hey, this is Canada. We just print money. All right, now let's take a look at a beautiful video of somebody enjoying their time at Yonge and Dundas Square in Toronto. Oh, wait, that's somebody pooping. Hold on a second. I thought that only happened on beaches. Nope, that happens right at the most populated area in all of Canada, Yonge and Dundas Square. You better believe it. And speaking of believing it, it's hard to believe that Justin Trudeau once said this: "We took on debt so Canadians wouldn't have to." And that was a press conference in 2020. Very, very interesting how all these things are now coming back to surface, going, hey, oh, I see how we got here. He's an idiot. I'd love to know what you guys think down below in the comments about that. And now let's take a look at what's going on with this long-range missile approval, pending approval, war, end of the world, nuclear warfare, kaboom, Russia, NATO news. So you've got this article here by The Independent saying the Ukraine-Russia war latest. Moscow threatens to melt Kiev as hundreds freed in major prisoner deal. So Mr. Zelensky has pleaded with allies for months to allow his military to fire long-range U.S. missiles, and Britain has said yes. And then you also have Justin Trudeau, who has said yes, and they're waiting for more people to give that approval. America has also, unfortunately, said yes, and we just seem to be on the brink of nuclear war. But nonetheless, meanwhile, Russia and Ukraine have exchanged prisoners of war, each side releasing 103 people for a total of 206. The Interfax news agency reported, citing Russia's defense ministry. And that's kind of unusual given all of the increased tension. So it seems like there could potentially be a resolution that doesn't involve the end of the world. But if every NATO country and NATO leader is saying, hey, we think that you should fire those missiles, then obviously that is not going to lead towards peace. It'll lead towards a bright white screen and no more waking up, but just a final dirt nap for pretty much everybody. So here you have Putin, who threatens NATO if Ukraine actually strikes with those long range missiles, the Shadow Storm or Storm Shadow.
With no end in sight to Russia's indiscriminate bombardment, Ukraine is upping the pressure on NATO to let it turn the tables. Putin and his accomplices must feel all the problems that war brings.
Ukraine must win this war against Russia.
This week, on a visit to Kyiv, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken hinted a change in U.S. policy is possible.
We have adjusted and adapted as needs have changed, as the battlefield has changed. And I have no doubt that we'll continue to do that.
That prompted Russian President Vladimir Putin to deliver a chilling warning about the consequences of any strikes with Western weapons. This will mean that NATO countries, the United States, and European countries are fighting Russia, he said.
If Mr. Putin is so concerned about the safety and security of Russian sites and cities, the easiest way to alleviate those concerns is to get his troops the hell out of Ukraine and the war.
Russia has so far shown little appetite for escalation beyond Ukraine.
The West does also know it's being played by Putin. It's not stupid. And so when Putin talks about a Russian NATO war, then it's taken seriously, but it is also well understood that this is a play.
Ukraine argues the best and perhaps only path to victory involves taking the fight back to Russia. Now the West must decide whether it's worth calling the bluff of a nuclear-armed Vladimir Putin.
So it's been a very, very long time since there's been a world war, and it just seems like the longer that gap continues, the more likely we're heading towards, the closer we are towards this, you know, the start of this next world war. And I don't know why the Western leaders, why NATO country leaders are saying, yeah, we don't really buy these threats. Look, Russia has seemed extremely tolerant of all of the nonsense that has gone on. And that might just be because we're subject to the news cycle here, and, you know, we're not seeing what's happening over there and what Russia and all of the other bad guy countries are saying about us on the daily, the way we talk about, like, our politicians talk about them on the daily. But it just seems like all of this is avoidable if egos are dropped and you have actual strong leaders that are more interested in peace instead of profiting. And again, the only American politician that I'm seeing as a Canadian, as somebody who's like just really, really wanting peace to happen for everybody, because everyone has increased their nuclear arsenal over the past 50 years to the point where there are insane amount of simulation videos. You can just type in nuclear war outcome, nuclear fallout 2024, and it's pretty crazy. And then your algorithm is going to hook, line, and sinker you if you do type that in, and you're going to be fed a bunch of videos that are going to say, hey, you should buy this bunker. This is why you need to protect your family. And that's the current state of my algorithm, which is why now for 2 or 3 videos in a row, we're talking about this war, because I can't get it off of my news cycle, and I feel like my hair is turning gray right in front of me. It is very scary. And I know. I could easily just walk away from it, but it just seems like this is the reality of what we're facing, a potential nuclear war, because idiots are in charge. And we're just going to have to wait and see how this does play out. But nonetheless, some big changes here from NATO. So the NATO Military Committee chair and others back Ukraine's use of long-range weapons to hit Russia. The head of NATO's military committee said Saturday that Ukraine has the solid legal and military right to strike deep inside Russia to gain combat advantage, reflecting the beliefs of a number of U.S. allies, even as the Biden administration balks to allowing Kiev to do so using American-made weapons. Every nation that is attacked has the right to defend itself, and that right doesn't stop at the border of your own nation. Now, Putin is a very litigious guy. He knows the definitions of war. He understands these things, given his background, and it seems like he's positioned himself to really, I mean, they're waiting for NATO to get more involved. If these missiles do go long range into, Moscow or other parts of Russia, then Putin will officially declare this a war, because up until this day, it hasn't been a war. Even though we're calling it here in the West the illegal invasion of Russia on Ukraine, or the war between Russia and Ukraine, Putin and Russia and all of those bad guys, that side of the playing field, has not to this day, from my understanding, called this an actual war yet, which is why you're seeing all the old equipment being used from World War II and Cold War and all that stuff, right? So if this eventually, hopefully not, does get called, though, a war, we're going to see shit hit the fan in a way that I don't even think can really understand. It's hard to think that you would see Chinese or Russian fighter jets flying above your sky, but who knows? I mean, yes, there's been movies about it, but also that could really happen. And that's maybe not something that the West is thinking about too much, because it feels like we're sheltered here. The war is happening over there, and we're just talking about stuff and saying, yeah, keep the war over there. Let's go. Let's escalate it. We're going to make a bunch of money. We're going to cover our debt. And that can have immense repercussions, not over there, but that war can definitely come here. I think that's what a lot of people with common sense are worried about, but I'd love to know what you guys think down below in the comments. Then you have the Gazette here saying Ukraine would have military reason for striking deeper into Russia, says NATO committee chief. And this is very frightening, because they're already trying to justify that they have the right to do this, to launch these missiles ahead of any approval that has happened for Ukraine to actually launch those missiles. They have the missiles in their possession. They're loaded and ready to go, but they're not legally allowed to hit that button to launch them deep into Russia, 300 kilometers at maximum range, because NATO has not given the actual green light, the thumbs up yet. Ukraine would have a good military reason to strike deeper into Russia using Western weapons, a senior NATO official said on Saturday. British Prime Minister met the U.S. President at the White House on Friday as Ukraine's allies discuss whether to give the go-ahead for Kiev to use long-range missiles against targets in Russia. President Vladimir Putin said the West would be directly fighting Russia if it allowed Ukraine to strike with Western-made long-range missiles. And I understand the military standpoint of trying to think that this is a bluff, saying, hey, look, we understand Putin saying this, but we're just going to dismiss it. In fact, it's being so dismissed that it's not really making consistent headlines here in not just Canada, but in the West. You see from time again, the news cycle is about, Kamala Harris is, making a fool of Donald Trump, or we're giving more money, more loans, more equipment to Ukraine, but we're not really subject to the actual threats and the seriousness that Russia and its allied countries are making. It's almost as if we are propagandizing ourselves. It just seems so freaking weird and delusional that these other massive powerhouse countries are making very real threats. And here in the West, we're going, yeah, let's not tell our people, let's not worry them. But gold prices have skyrocketed. Also, Costco is selling meal kits that last 25 years for your bunkers. The rise in interest in buying bunkers for personal use has skyrocketed. And it just seems like the steps are there, but the news and the seriousness isn't. And maybe that's to avoid mass panic, but also I feel like we should be clued in to how serious this actually is, because then you come across videos like this where it's like, no way, Mr. Sunshine. I seen in the comments in the last video saying nuclear weapons aren't even real. Okay, random user, sure, nuclear weapons aren't real. We're going to take your word on that. Anyways, NATO Chief of Defense-elect Major General Remigiusz to be next Director of General for the NATO International Military Staff. So they're shifting people around to try and put them in more advantageous positions to make these executive decisions. And so this guy's from Lithuania, and they've recently said that all friendships are over, and they've actually set up, they do border Russia, and they've set up barricades, and they are prepping themselves for, a potential Russia invasion into Lithuania. So it seems like every country is really taking that right step to protect themselves, except for here in the West, because the war is over there. So what do we have to worry about? Really, guys, nothing to worry about at all. And then you have Vladimir Zelensky, who's posting on X, and it feels like either he's being throttled because his videos used to get millions of views, or people have just lost significant amount of interest in what he has to say. But even with this video where Zelensky met with delegations from the US Congress, it's just so weird. It feels like all of this is for show to make some sort of narrative. The first minute and a bit is Zelensky saying thank you to Americans, thank you to the United States government. And the rest of the video is a member of Congress saying we need to fight for democracy in Ukraine because it represents democracy around the world. And that took apparently 3 minutes to explain. And then that was it. They didn't talk about any policies. They didn't talk about anything else. It just seems weird and fake. And I think everyone is now wondering, why are we spending so much money on Ukraine? Why are we giving this so much attention? Why aren't the news outlets, why aren't politicians talking about peace? What's it going to take for peace? How do we stop this? How do we all get along? How do we remove the sanctions? How do we have the peace between Russia and Ukraine? What can we offer to make this more lucrative deal for all parties involved? and then stopping the war. That's what the people really want. And with the rise of technology, with how scary technology really has become and how much nuclear power a lot of countries have, it just seems so ridiculous to keep pushing war, and war. There's other ways to make money. But at the expense of innocent lives, at the expense of the stress of a nuclear war and the potential outcome, which is increasingly becoming more likely of a nuclear war, I gotta say, it's not worth it. But if you're wondering what is gonna happen about these long-range missiles, you have a CBS video here that kind of explains what they think NATO should be doing, or what Ukraine should be doing with these weapons.
So what is the argument on Ukraine's part? We know what Putin is threatening. Why does Ukraine say it's worth it?
Because, well, it's the same argument they've been making this whole time, that the more you help us push back Russia now, the less likely it is that he wins enough territory in Ukraine to essentially take over and then continue pushing into the rest of Europe. The concern, however, that Western leaders have had all this time is if you do that, the escalation could come regardless, because he'll see it as NATO essentially picking a fight with Russia and taking Ukraine's side on this. So from here over to Italy, back to the UK, then several of these world leaders, of course, will be in and around New York later this month for the UN, where Ukraine inevitably is among the topics that will be discussed. The other thing that the British Prime Minister has been doing in advance of this trip is he's sent over a handful of his political aides to talk to the Harris campaign about how it is the Labour Party was able to win a campaign based, in essence, on inflation and issues of dollars and cents earlier this year over there, and what lessons could be learned potentially over here as Democrats try to hold on to the White House in November.
Very interesting. And just seeing as we're talking about some domestic politics, the president is going to be attending the annual conference of the Congressional Black Caucus. It is underway this weekend. One could argue, this is an influential group, and one could even argue that part of the reason why we have, Kamala Harris as the VP is because of, the enthusiastic sort of suggestion coming from the Congressional Black Caucus and some of its more prominent members. What's going to be sort of taking place with the Biden-Harris administration? How are they going to make their presence known at this year's conference?
They attend a big gala dinner that's held over the weekend here in Washington, as they have the last few years, because you're right, the vice president is in essence the greatest example of that caucus's political success by having her graduate from Congress into the vice presidency and now potentially on the verge of the presidency. The president and the vice president have been frequent attendees at their annual conferences here in Washington. I suppose the bigger question is, will they also make time next week for the Congressional Hispanic Caucus meetings, which get held right after the CPC? This is that one stretch of time that Congress is in town this month ahead of the election. So there's a lot of these kinds of dinners and events being held now ahead of the election. So you're going to see a lot of focus on getting the president in sort of a goodbye tour to some of these events, and then the vice president to show up, or at least her running mate, Tim Walz, to also, in essence, case the ring of these different organizations and make sure they're on board ahead of the election.
And before I let you go, is there a brunch going on today as well?
Yeah, nobody cares. I feel like the media is failing the West by not pushing a narrative for peace. The media has been saying, look, you need to support Ukraine or else you're wrong and you're the bad guy. And anyone who criticizes how much money we've been spending and the relationship that we have with Ukraine, you're accused of Russian propaganda and mis and disinformation. It doesn't make any sense. The left has now become warmongers, and the right is saying we need peace, when 50 years ago, the right was more pro-war and the left were the hippies saying we need peace. So things are very backwards right now, and it's just kind of left me scratching my head going, well, I don't have a bunker, at least not yet. My algorithm is certainly telling me I should definitely get one. I'd love to know what you guys think down below in the comments. Are you taking this, this potential World War III seriously, or do you think this is a nothing burger? Let me know what you guys think. And as always, on your way out, I'd like to encourage you guys one last time, if you haven't yet already, to smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't yet already, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.